There's been some mistake, the trembling merchant declares as the dust settles around the stagecoach, his voice cutting through the desert heat as he stares at the dignified black woman clutching her correspondence. The gathered crowd murmurs agreement, their eyes cold with dismissal, already writing her story's end. Another soul cast back into the wilderness to face whatever fate awaits the unwanted. She stands alone, chin raised despite the scorn, while whispers predict her inevitable departure on tomorrow's stage. But the giant cowboy watching from the saloon steps sees something else entirely, a strength that doesn't bow to their cruelty, a composure that speaks of hidden depths. What he doesn't know is that her mind holds secrets that could save or destroy every soul in this dusty town, including his own. Will he step forward and change both their destinies forever? The stagecoach wheels ground to a halt outside Cedar Falls General Store, kicking up clouds of dust that settled on everything like judgment. Magnolia Hartwell stepped down carefully, her dark blue traveling dress pristine despite the long journey. She clutched a worn letter in her gloved hand, the paper soft from repeated reading. Word had already spread. A crowd gathered near the store entrance, faces curious and expectant. Magnolia smoothed her skirts and approached the building, her spine straight despite the butterflies dancing in her stomach. Ezra Whitmore emerged from behind the counter, wiping flour-dusted hands on his apron. His pale face went ashen when he saw her. The store fell silent except for the creak of settling wood. "You must be Ezra Whitmore." Magnolia's voice carried clearly in the hushed space. Ezra's eyes darted to the watching crowd, then back to her face. His mouth opened and closed twice before words came. "There's been some mistake. I have your letter here." She held up the correspondence. "You requested a bride who could read, write, and manage household accounts. I never." Ezra stepped backward, bumping into a barrel of grain. "I mean, there must be some confusion about." The crowd pressed closer. Women whispered behind fans. Men shifted their weight and exchanged glances. Children peered around their mothers' skirts with wide eyes. "About what, exactly?" Magnolia kept her voice level, though heat crept up her neck. Ezra's courage crumbled entirely. "About everything. I can't. This won't work." From across the dusty street, Cohen Bradford pushed away from the saloon's wooden support beam where he'd been watching the spectacle unfold. His weathered hands clenched into fists at his sides. The woman stood alone in that crowd like a deer surrounded by wolves, but her chin stayed raised. "Miss, you'll need to catch the next stage out," called someone from the crowd. "Ain't no place for your kind here," added another voice. Magnolia's jaw tightened, but she didn't respond to the jeers. Instead, she kept her attention on Ezra. "Your letter promised marriage and a home in exchange for domestic skills. I've traveled 800 miles based on that promise." "I know what I wrote," Ezra mumbled, "but I didn't know you were." "What I was." Silas Murrellan stepped forward from the crowd, his banker's vest immaculate despite the dusty street. His smile looked practiced and cold. Now, let's all be civilized here. Miss, was it? I'm sure we can find some arrangement. The hotel needs cleaning staff, pays not much, but it's honest work." Magnolia studied his face carefully. Something in his tone made her skin crawl, though she couldn't pinpoint why. "I came here to be married, not to scrub floors." "Well, circumstances change," Silas replied smoothly. "A woman in your position can't be too particular." The crowd murmured agreement. Several people nodded. A few women looked sympathetic, but none spoke up. Cohen had heard enough. He stepped into the street, his boots making solid sounds against the packed dirt. Conversation stopped. Heads turned. Everyone knew Cohen Bradford kept to himself and rarely involved himself in town business. "Afternoon, folks." His deep voice carried easily across the space. "Cohen," Silas nodded, "just helping this young lady understand her situation. Seems clear enough to me." Cohen looked directly at Magnolia. "You came here expecting marriage and got something else entirely." "That's right." "You have anywhere else to go?" Magnolia hesitated, then shook her head once. "My ranch needs managing, books are a mess, house needs a woman's touch." Interested in a partnership instead of whatever Whitmore was offering. The crowd erupted in whispers. Ezra's face went 3 shades paler. Silas's practiced smile flickered. "You're talking about marriage?" Magnolia asked carefully. "I'm talking about mutual benefit. You need security. I need help. We both need respect, and we'll give it to each other." Magnolia studied his face the same way she'd examined Silas's, but found something entirely different. Honesty maybe, or at least the absence of deception. "I don't know anything about ranching. I don't know anything about keeping proper books. We'll figure it out." From the crowd, someone called out, "Cohen, you sure about this?" More sure than Whitmore, apparently. Ezra flinched but said nothing. Magnolia looked around at the faces surrounding her. Some showed curiosity, others disapproval. A few displayed outright hostility, but none offered alternatives. "All right, Mr. Bradford. I accept your proposal." Silas stepped forward again. "Now hold on. Maybe we should all think about this. The lady needs to understand how things work in Cedar Falls before making hasty decisions. Seems like she understands perfectly." Cohen's voice carried a warning edge. "Question is whether Cedar Falls understands her." As they spoke, Magnolia's sharp eyes caught sight of a notice posted on the store's window. "Foreclosure auction. 3 family names listed." She'd seen similar notices on buildings throughout town during her walk from the stage depot. Something wasn't adding up. The town looked prosperous enough. The bank building was solid brick. The general store was well stocked. Yet families were losing their farms. "When can we start?" she asked Cohen. "Right now if you're ready." Magnolia nodded once. "I'm ready." The crowd watched in stunned silence as Cohen Bradford extended his arm to the woman they'd all expected to see run out of town. She took it with dignity and tact, and together they walked toward his waiting horse and wagon. Behind them, Silas Morelland's calculating gaze followed their every step. If you are enjoying this story of how one moment of courage can change 2 lives forever, don't forget to comment where you are tuning in from to show how this story can connect us across any distances, backgrounds, and hearts. Because what will happen in the next part at Cohen's ranch will completely change everything we thought we knew about Magnolia. The Bradford Ranch spread across rolling hills dotted with mesquite and oak trees. Cattle grazed in distant pastures, while the main house sat weathered but solid against the horizon. Cohen helped Magnolia down from the wagon, her traveling bag clutched in one hand. "It's not much to look at," he said, gesturing toward the ranch house. "It's more than I had an hour ago." Magnolia studied the property with calculating eyes. Good water access, decent grazing land, the bones of prosperity were there. Inside, chaos reigned. Papers scattered across the kitchen table, ledger books stacked in crooked towers, bills stuffed into mason jars like pickled vegetables. The entire operation looked like it had been managed by throwing documents at the wall to see what stuck. Cohen rubbed the back of his neck. "Told you it was a mess." Magnolia set down her bag and approached the table. Her fingers traced over receipts and invoices, noting dates and amounts. "How long has it been like this?" "Since my partner died 2 years back." He handled the numbers. "I handle everything else." "May I?" She gestured toward the papers. "That's why you're here." Magnolia rolled up her sleeves and began sorting. Bills in one pile, receipts in another, correspondence in a third. Her movements were quick and efficient, like she was conducting a familiar orchestra. "You said you needed help with household accounts," she said, not looking up from her work. "This isn't household bookkeeping. This is business accounting for a major cattle operation." "Same thing, isn't it?" "Not even close." She continued sorting, her mind already calculating patterns and relationships between the numbers. Within an hour, she had the entire mess organized into logical categories. Cohen watched from the doorway, coffee cup in hand. "Where did you learn to do that?" Magnolia paused, her hands still on the papers. "Back east. I helped my father with his business before he died." "What kind of business?" "Import and export, shipping manifests, customs documents, currency exchanges." She didn't mention the college degree. "Not yet." Cohen nodded slowly. "Sounds complicated." Everything's complicated until you understand the system. She opened the first ledger book and began transcribing information from the sorted piles. Her handwriting was precise, each number perfectly formed. As she worked, patterns began emerging from the chaos. "Mr. Bradford, when did you last turn a profit?" "Profit?" Cohen laughed bitterly. "Haven't seen black ink in 2 years." Magnolia's pen stopped moving. She looked up at him with sharp eyes. "That's impossible." "Tell that to my bank account." "No, I mean mathematically impossible." She turned the ledger toward him. "Look at these numbers. Cattle sales from last month alone should have covered your operating expenses for 3 months." Cohen set down his coffee and moved closer. The neat columns of figures meant little to him, but her confidence was absolute. "You sold 40 head to the Abilene buyer for $60 each. That's $2,400 gross. Your feed costs for the quarter were $300. Property maintenance, $200. Loan payments to the bank, $400 monthly." Her finger traced down the column as she calculated aloud. "Even accounting for transportation costs and seasonal expenses, you should be showing substantial profit." "Should be and are ain't the same thing." "No, they're not." Magnolia's voice grew thoughtful. "Which means money is going somewhere it shouldn't be." She spent the next 3 hours reconstructing 2 years of financial records. Cohen prepared a simple dinner while she worked, occasionally glancing over at her bent head. The woman attacked those numbers like a detective pursuing clues. "There," she finally announced, leaning back in her chair. Cohen approached the table. Where chaos had reigned that morning, perfect order now existed. Income in one column, expenses in another, with running calculations that showed the ranch's true financial position. "According to this, you're not broke, you're prosperous." "That can't be right." "It is right. Your ranch has generated consistent profits for the past 18 months. The question is where that money went." She opened a separate notebook and began writing. "Your bank statements show regular deposits that match your cattle sales, but the account balance never reflects the accumulated wealth." Cohen studied the figures over her shoulder. Even with his limited mathematical skills, the discrepancy was clear. "Somebody's been stealing from me." "Not necessarily stealing. Could be unauthorized loans against your account, could be fraudulent charges, could be simple bookkeeping errors that compound over time. Or it could be stealing." Magnolia nodded grimly. "Or it could be stealing." The front door rattled with heavy knocks. Cohen opened it to find Silas Murrelin standing on the porch, hat in hand and that practiced smile firmly in place. "Evening, Cohen. Thought I'd stop by and see how our new neighbor is settling in." "She's settling fine." Silas peered over Cohen's shoulder toward the kitchen table where Magnolia sat surrounded by organized paperwork. "Goodness, look at all that work. Hope she's not overwhelming herself with complicated matters." "She's managing just fine." Of course, of course. Just want to make sure she understands how we do business in Cedar Falls. Sometimes city folks have different ideas about rural finances." Magnolia looked up from her work. "What kind of ideas?" "Oh, you know, overthinking simple transactions, questioning established relationships between neighbors." His smile never wavered, but his eyes were calculating. "The important thing is maintaining trust in our community institutions. Trust should be earned through transparency." "Naturally. Though sometimes too much scrutiny can damage perfectly good partnerships." Silas stepped into the house uninvited. "Mind if I take a look at what you're working on? Might be able to help clarify any confusing entries." Cohen moved to block his path. "We'll handle our own books, thanks. Just being neighborly." "You're kind of neighborly, we can do without." Silas's smile finally cracked. For just a moment, something cold and dangerous flickered across his features. Then the practiced expression returned. "Well, if you change your minds about needing guidance, you know where to find me." After he left, Magnolia stared at the closed door. He was very interested in these papers. Too interested. "Mr. Bradford, I think your financial problems might be bigger than one ranch's bookkeeping." If you are enjoying this story of how Magnolia's hidden brilliance is starting to uncover dangerous secrets, Don't forget to comment where you are tuning in from to show how this story can connect us across any distances, backgrounds, and hearts. Because what Magnolia discovers next about the entire town of Cedar Falls will put both her and Cohen in serious danger. 2 weeks passed in comfortable routine. Magnolia transformed the ranch house from bachelor chaos into organized efficiency. More importantly, she transformed the ranch's financial standing from apparent failure to clear prosperity. Cohen watched her work with growing admiration that had nothing to do with her bookkeeping skills. She moved through the house with quiet confidence, humming while she prepared meals or mended his shirts. When she smiled at something he said, warmth spread through his chest like good whiskey. When she asked his opinion on ranch decisions, he felt valued in ways he'd forgotten were possible. The Henderson place is going up for auction tomorrow, she mentioned over breakfast, pointing to a notice in the local paper. Good family, don't understand why they're losing the farm. Magnolia set down her coffee cup. Maybe I could take a look at their situation, see if there's something they're missing. Silas handles most of the lending around here, might not appreciate outside interference. Then we won't tell him. That afternoon, they rode to the Henderson farm under the pretense of buying chickens. Martha Henderson greeted them with tired eyes and a forced smile. Her husband Tom emerged from the barn, shoulders bent under invisible weight. "Heard you might have laying hens for sale," Cohen said. "Sure do. Need the money anyway, seeing as we'll be gone next week." While the men discussed poultry, Magnolia followed Martha into the kitchen. The house was clean but sparse, with gaps on shelves where valuable items had been sold. "I'm sorry about your situation," Magnolia said gently. Martha's composure cracked slightly. 20 years we've been here, built this place from nothing. May I ask what happened? Drought hit us hard 2 seasons back. Had to borrow against the farm to buy feed and seed. Been making payments regular ever since, but Silas says we're behind. Do you keep records of your payments? Martha nodded and retrieved a wooden box from the kitchen dresser. Inside were carefully preserved receipts, each one documenting payments made to Morelland's bank. Magnolia studied them with growing concern. "Mrs. Henderson, according to these receipts, you've paid more than enough to satisfy your original loan." "That's what I thought too. But Silas showed us the bank ledger. Says we still owe $300 plus penalties." Magnolia's jaw tightened. The pattern was identical to what she'd suspected about Cohen's missing profits. "Would you mind if I copied these figures?" "Won't do any good. Judge Clay's already signed the foreclosure papers. Still, I'd like to document everything." That evening, Magnolia spread the Henderson receipts across the kitchen table alongside Cohen's financial records. She worked by lamplight, cross-referencing dates and amounts, building a mathematical case that grew more damning with each calculation. "It's systematic," she finally announced. "Silas is stealing from everyone." Cohen looked up from oiling his saddle. "How do you figure? The Hendersons have made every payment on time for 18 months. Their receipts prove it. But somehow the bank ledger shows a completely different story." She opened her notebook and showed him the comparison. "Either the Hendersons are forging bank receipts, which makes no sense, or Silas is keeping 2 sets of books. 2 sets. One showing what people actually pay, which he pockets. Another showing inflated debts, which he uses to justify foreclosures." Her voice grew heated with righteous anger. "He's stealing their payments and then stealing their land when they can't pay debts that don't actually exist." Cohen set down his leather work and moved to the table. The evidence was clear even to his untrained eye. "How many families you think he's doing this to?" "All of them, probably. Anyone who's had to borrow money in the past few years." "That's half the county." Magnolia nodded grimly. "And tomorrow the Hendersons lose everything because they can't prove the bank records are fraudulent." "What kind of proof would they need?" "Access to Silas's real ledgers. The ones showing actual payments received versus debts recorded." She closed her notebook with determination. "Or someone who understands financial systems well enough to demonstrate the mathematical impossibilities in court. Someone like you. Someone exactly like me." Cohen studied her face in the lamplight. "You're not just good with numbers, are you?" Magnolia hesitated, then made a decision that had been building for days. "I attended Oberlin College in Ohio, graduated with honors in mathematics and business administration." The admission hung in the air between them. Cohen's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. "College? Yes. You've been letting people think you're just good at household accounts. People see what they expect to see. A black woman who can balance a checkbook is remarkable. A black woman with a college degree is threatening." Cohen nodded slowly. "But you could prove Silas is cheating people." "I could try. If I could examine his books and compare them to individual payment records." She met his gaze directly. "But it would mean revealing exactly how educated I am. Once that's out, there's no taking it back. And some people don't like being shown up by someone they consider beneath them." The next morning brought unexpected visitors. Ezra Whitmore appeared at their door looking haggard and guilty. Behind him stood Judge Augustus Clay, a stern man with silver hair and penetrating eyes. "Cohen, Miss Magnolia," Ezra stammered. "Judge Clay wanted to speak with you both before the Henderson auction." The judge stepped forward. "I've been hearing interesting rumors about mathematical discrepancies in local foreclosure cases. Thought I might get your perspective before making final rulings." Magnolia exchanged glances with Cohen. This was the moment of truth. She could stay quiet and let injustice proceed, or risk everything to fight for what was right. "Your Honor, I believe several families are losing their homes based on fraudulent financial records. That's a serious accusation." "Yes, sir. It is." Judge Clay's eyes sharpened with interest. "I think we need to have a longer conversation. If you are enjoying this story of how Magnolia's courage is about to expose a massive conspiracy, don't forget to comment where you are tuning in from to show how this story can connect us across any distances, backgrounds, and hearts. Because what happens next in Judge Clay's courtroom will either save an entire community or destroy Magnolia and Cohen forever. Judge Clay sat at the kitchen table, studying Magnolia's meticulously organized evidence. His weathered hands turned pages slowly, examining each calculation with the careful attention of a man accustomed to weighing truth against deception. "These figures suggest a pattern of financial manipulation spanning at least 2 years," he said finally. "Yes, Your Honor. The mathematical discrepancies are consistent across multiple accounts. You understand the seriousness of these accusations. Banking fraud is a federal offense." Magnolia's spine straightened. "I understand that families are losing their homes based on falsified records." Judge Clay's eyes sharpened. "Where did you acquire this level of financial expertise?" The question hung heavy in the air. Ezra shifted nervously by the door. Cohen moved slightly closer to Magnolia, a gesture of silent support. "Oberlin College. I studied mathematics and business administration." "College." The judge's tone revealed nothing. "Interesting." He continued examining her work, asking pointed questions about compound interest calculations and debt restructuring principles. Magnolia answered each query with precision, her confidence growing as she demonstrated the depth of her knowledge. "Your analysis appears thorough and mathematically sound," Judge Clay concluded. "However, proving fraud requires more than theoretical calculations. We need access to Morellin's actual ledger books." "Which he'll never voluntarily provide," Cohen observed. "No, he won't." The judge closed Magnolia's notebook. "But a formal court proceeding could compel production of banking records." "You're willing to challenge Silas publicly?" Magnolia asked. Judge Clay's expression remained carefully neutral. "I'm willing to ensure justice is served according to the law." That afternoon, the Henderson auction proceeded as scheduled. Most of the town gathered in front of the courthouse, some hoping for bargains, others simply curious about the proceedings. Magnolia and Cohen stood near the back of the crowd, watching families bid on their neighbors' possessions. Silas conducted the sale with practiced efficiency, his voice carrying clearly across the assembled crowd. "Fine farmland, good water rights, solid house and barn. Bidding starts at $200. Several hands went up immediately. The Hendersons stood to one side, faces etched with grief and resignation. Their children clung to Martha's skirts, too young to understand they were watching their home disappear forever. 250, 300. Do I hear 350? Your Honor, Magnolia called out, her voice cutting through the auction chatter. The crowd turned. Judge Clay stepped forward from where he'd been observing near the courthouse steps. I'm calling a halt to these proceedings pending investigation of potential irregularities in the foreclosure documentation. Murmurs rippled through the gathering. Silas's smile flickered but held firm. What irregularities, Your Honor? Everything's been filed according to proper procedures. That's what we intend to verify. I'm ordering a formal hearing for tomorrow morning. All relevant banking records will be subject to court examination. Silas's confident facade cracked slightly. Your Honor, surely this is unnecessary. The Hendersons defaulted on their loan obligations. Then the records will confirm that fact. Judge Clay's tone brooked no argument. Court convenes at 10 o'clock sharp. The crowd dispersed in excited whispers. Some people approached the Hendersons with sympathy and support. Others gathered around Silas, their expressions ranging from curious to concerned. You've stirred up a hornet's nest, Cohen murmured to Magnolia as they walked back to their wagon. Good, maybe some hornets need stirring. That evening, Ezra appeared at their door again, this time alone and visibly agitated. Can I speak with you both? They invited him inside. He sat heavily at the kitchen table, head in his hands. I owe you an apology, he said to Magnolia. What I did at the stage depot was wrong. Shameful? Yes, it was. I let fear make my decisions. Fear of what people would think, fear of standing out, fear of being different. He looked up at her. But watching you these past weeks, seeing how you've helped people, how you've stood up for what's right, it's made me realize what real courage looks like. Magnolia's expression softened slightly. What's done is done. No, it's not. That's why I'm here. Ezra reached into his coat pocket and withdrew a small leather-bound ledger. Silas asked me to keep this for him a few months back, said it was just backup records for his personal reference. Cohen leaned forward. You've had Silas's books this whole time. I didn't know what they were. Thought they were just extra paperwork. Ezra placed the ledger on the table, but after hearing about tomorrow's hearing, I took a closer look. Magnolia opened the book carefully. Page after page revealed meticulous records of actual payments received from various families, alongside completely different amounts recorded in the official bank ledgers. The discrepancies were staggering. This is it, she breathed. This is proof of the dual bookkeeping system. There's more, Ezra continued. Silas has been pressuring several of us business owners to keep quiet about certain irregularities we've noticed. Offered incentives for our cooperation. What kind of incentives? Reduced rent on my store space, favorable loan terms, special considerations on supply deliveries. Ezra's voice grew stronger. I accepted his offers because they made life easier, but I realize now I was helping him steal from my neighbors. Cohen studied the smaller man with new respect. Takes guts to admit that. Takes more guts to do something about it. Ezra turned to Magnolia. I want to testify tomorrow. Tell the court everything I know about Silas's operations. That could hurt your business relationships. My business relationships are with this community. If I help Silas destroy that community, what good are those relationships? Magnolia spent the rest of the evening preparing for the next day's hearing. She cross-referenced every entry in Silas's hidden ledger with the evidence she'd already compiled. The mathematical proof was overwhelming and undeniable. You ready for this? Cohen asked as they prepared for bed. As ready as anyone can be for turning their life upside down. Our lives, he corrected gently. She looked at him with surprise and gratitude. Our lives. Outside, wind rattled the windows and clouds gathered on the horizon. Tomorrow would bring either justice or catastrophe, and Magnolia suspected there would be little middle ground between the two. If you are enjoying this story of how Magnolia and Cohen are about to face their biggest challenge yet, Don't forget to comment where you are tuning in from to show how this story can connect us across any distances, backgrounds, and hearts. Because what happens in tomorrow's courtroom showdown will either expose the truth and save the community, or destroy everyone who dared to stand up for justice. The courthouse filled before dawn. Every seat was occupied by ranchers, shopkeepers, and their families. The Hendersons sat in the front row, clutching each other's hands. Behind them, a dozen other families facing foreclosure waited with desperate hope etched on their faces. Silas entered with confident strides, nodding to supporters scattered throughout the crowd. His expensive suit and polished shoes projected prosperity and respectability. Several prominent citizens smiled and waved, their loyalty to the town's financial pillar still intact. Magnolia sat beside Cohen, her evidence folder thick with documentation. She'd barely slept, reviewing calculations and preparing for questions she knew would come. Her college education was about to be revealed to an entire community that had dismissed her as a simple housewife. Judge Clay entered precisely at 10 o'clock. The crowd rose in respect, then settled into tense silence. This hearing will examine allegations of financial irregularities in recent foreclosure proceedings, he announced. Mr. Moreland, you're required to present all banking records related to the Henderson mortgage and any similar accounts. Silas stood smoothly. Your Honor, these accusations are baseless. My records are entirely proper and legally compliant. He produced a ledger identical to the one Ezra had delivered the night before, at least on the surface. The entries showed the Henderson family consistently behind on payments, accumulating penalties and interest that justified foreclosure. As you can see, the Hendersons have failed to meet their obligations despite numerous extensions and considerations. Martha Henderson gasped. That's not true. We made every payment on time. Mrs. Henderson, emotions don't change mathematics, Silas replied condescendingly. The numbers speak for themselves. Judge Clay examined the ledger carefully. These records appear complete and professionally maintained. Do you have evidence contradicting these entries? Magnolia rose from her seat. Yes, Your Honor. I do. The courtroom buzzed with whispers. Several people craned their necks to get a better look at the woman who dared challenge the banker's expertise. State your qualifications for analyzing financial records. I hold a degree in mathematics and business administration from Oberlin College in Ohio. The whispers became audible gasps. Cohen felt the shift in the room's atmosphere as shock rippled through the crowd. A black woman with a college degree was unprecedented in Cedar Falls. College, someone muttered. Well, I'll be. Judge Clay's expression remained neutral. Proceed with your analysis. Magnolia opened her folder and approached the front of the courtroom. Her voice carried clearly despite her racing heart. Your Honor, I've conducted a comprehensive analysis of the Henderson family's payment history using standard accounting principles. According to their receipts, they've made consistent monthly payments of $25 for 18 consecutive months. She produced Martha Henderson's carefully preserved receipts, spreading them across the table for examination. $25 monthly for 18 months equals $450 in total payments. Their original loan principal was $300. Even accounting for reasonable interest rates, their debt should have been satisfied months ago. Silas stepped forward. Those receipts could be forged. Anyone can write numbers on paper. That's true, Magnolia agreed calmly, but mathematical relationships cannot be forged. She turned to address the courtroom directly, her confidence growing with each word. Mr. Moreland's ledger shows the Hendersons owing $300 plus accumulated penalties. However, it also shows them making irregular payments in amounts that don't correspond to any logical payment schedule. Her finger traced across the entries as she spoke. According to this official record, they paid $15 in January, $37 in March, and $8 in May. These random amounts serve no financial purpose except to create confusion. Judge Clay leaned forward with interest. Explain the significance. In legitimate lending, payment amounts follow mathematical logic, equal monthly installments or payments that systematically reduce principal and interest. Random payment amounts suggest deliberate obfuscation of actual transactions. Ezra stood up from his seat. "Your Honor, I have additional evidence." He produced the hidden ledger, his hands trembling slightly as he approached the front of the courtroom. "Silas asked me to store this for safekeeping. I didn't understand its significance until last night." Judge Clay accepted the second ledger and opened it carefully. His eyebrows rose as he compared entries between the two books. "Mr. Moreland, this appears to be a duplicate set of records showing completely different payment amounts for the same time periods." Silas's composure finally cracked. "I've never seen that book before. Whitmore must have fabricated it to support these ridiculous accusations." "The handwriting appears identical to your official ledger," the judge observed. Magnolia stepped forward again. "Your Honor, may I demonstrate the mathematical proof?" At the judge's nod, she began writing calculations on a portable blackboard someone had brought from the schoolhouse. Using the payments recorded in Mr. Whitmore's ledger, the Henderson debt calculates to a balance of negative $47. They've actually overpaid their loan by that amount. She turned to face the courtroom, her voice growing stronger with conviction. "Furthermore, applying the same analysis to other families facing foreclosure reveals identical patterns. Systematic theft disguised as legitimate banking procedures." The crowd erupted in angry voices. Tom Henderson stood up, his face flushed with rage and relief. "You mean we don't owe anything? You mean Silas has been stealing from us?" "That's exactly what it means," Magnolia replied firmly. Judge Clay pounded his gavel for order. When silence returned, his voice carried the weight of final judgment. "Mr. Moreland, the evidence strongly suggests fraudulent manipulation of banking records. You're under arrest pending federal investigation of your business practices." Two deputies moved toward Silas, who backed away with panic replacing his earlier confidence. "This is persecution. You're taking the word of an educated woman over a respected businessman." "I'm taking the word of mathematics over manipulation," Judge Clay replied coldly. As the deputies led Silas away, the courtroom exploded in celebration and vindication. Families embraced each other, tears flowing freely as the weight of impending foreclosure lifted from their shoulders. Magnolia felt Cohen's arm around her waist, steady and proud. Around them, people who had dismissed her weeks earlier now looked at her with respect and gratitude. Tom Henderson approached with tears in his eyes. "Ma'am, you saved our home, our entire future. Mathematics saved your home, Mr. Henderson. I just knew how to read the numbers." If you are enjoying this story of how Magnolia's brilliant mind and courage just exposed massive corruption and saved an entire community, don't forget to comment where you are tuning in from to show how this story can connect us across any distances, backgrounds, and hearts. Because what happens next will show how one person's determination to stand up for justice can transform not just their own life, but an entire town's future. 3 months later, Cedar Falls bore little resemblance to the town that had rejected Magnolia at the Stagecoach Depot. The federal investigation had uncovered theft totaling over $15,000, money that was returned to the families Silas had cheated. Properties were restored to their rightful owners, and the community began healing from years of systematic exploitation. Magnolia stood in the doorway of her new office on Main Street, watching workers hang a freshly painted sign. Bradford Financial Services gleamed in gold letters against forest green paint. The name represented both her married identity and her professional credentials, a balance she'd negotiated carefully with the community's expectations. Judge Clay had officially appointed her as county financial advisor, a position that came with substantial authority and respect. More importantly, it came with the power to prevent future fraud through proper oversight of local banking operations. "Looks good," Cohen said, joining her on the wooden sidewalk. His arms circled her waist naturally, a gesture that had become as comfortable as breathing over the past months. It feels surreal sometimes. 6 months ago, I was being rejected for marriage. Now I'm running the county's financial oversight department. Now you're doing what you were always meant to do. The morning brought their first official clients. Martha Henderson arrived with her husband Tom, both carrying ledger books and wearing expressions of determined hope. Behind them came 3 other farming families, each seeking help organizing their finances now that they could trust their money would be handled honestly. "Mrs. Bradford," Martha said warmly, "we'd like to hire your services to help us plan for next year's crops." The easy acceptance in her voice still surprised Magnolia. The same woman who had once served her coffee grudgingly now sought her expertise willingly. The transformation hadn't happened overnight, but it had been thorough. "I'd be honored to help." As they worked through crop rotation schedules and profit projections, more people gathered outside the office. Word had spread through the farming community about Magnolia's ability to maximize profits through strategic planning. What had begun as fraud investigation had evolved into comprehensive financial consulting. By midday, Ezra appeared with a proposal that made Magnolia laugh out loud. "You want me to teach mathematics at the school? Part-time. Maybe 2 afternoons a week. The children need to understand numbers the way you do." His earnestness was touching. "Especially the girls. They should know they can learn anything they set their minds to." Magnolia considered the offer carefully. Teaching would mean even greater visibility in the community, but it also meant shaping young minds toward broader possibilities. "I accept, with one condition." "Anything." "We teach practical applications. Banking, business accounting, household budgeting. Mathematics that prepares them for real life." "Deal." That evening, Cohen found Magnolia on their front porch, reading correspondence by lamplight. Their ranch house had evolved into something that reflected both their personalities. Her books shared shelf space with his practical manuals. Her organized systems complemented his straightforward approach to daily tasks. "Letter from Ohio," she said, holding up official-looking papers. "Your family, Oberlin College. They want me to speak at their commencement ceremony next spring about applying education to social justice." Cohen settled into the chair beside her. "You going to do it?" "I think so. It feels important to show other young women what's possible when they refuse to accept limitations. Cedar Falls won't be the same without you for a week." Magnolia smiled at the implication that her temporary absence would be noticed and mourned. The community that had once wanted her gone now depended on her expertise and leadership. "Speaking of Cedar Falls being different, did you see the latest arrival?" A stagecoach had brought a new mail-order bride that afternoon, a young Irish woman seeking marriage with widower Patrick O'Sullivan. Unlike Magnolia's arrival, this woman had been welcomed warmly by the community. Several families had offered temporary lodging while she and Patrick got acquainted. "Different world from when I arrived." "Same world. Different people running it." The next morning brought Judge Clay with news that would cement Magnolia's transformation from rejected outsider to essential community leader. "The territorial governor wants to discuss establishing a regional banking oversight board," he announced over coffee in their kitchen. "He specifically requested your involvement. Regional oversight, covering 5 counties, ensuring what happened here doesn't happen anywhere else." Judge Clay's satisfaction was evident. "Your methods could protect thousands of families across the territory." Magnolia absorbed the implications. Her mathematical skills and moral conviction, once seen as threats to social order, were now being recognized as essential tools for justice and prosperity. "What would that mean for our life here?" "Travel a few days each month. Training other investigators. Developing standardized procedures for detecting financial fraud." The judge smiled. "Plus a salary that reflects the true value of your expertise." Cohen reached across the table to squeeze her hand. "Sounds like the kind of work you were born to do." 6 months after that, Magnolia stood once again at the Cedar Falls Stagecoach Depot. This time she wore a tailored traveling suit and carried a briefcase full of official documents. She was departing for the territorial capital to present her anti-fraud protocols to government officials. A crowd had gathered to see her off, not from curiosity or hostility, but from genuine affection and pride. The Hendersons brought fresh bread for her journey. Ezra presented her with a new ledger book crafted specifically for her use. Even some of the women who had initially scorned her now embraced her with warm wishes. "Bring honor to Cedar Falls," called someone from the crowd. "She already has," Martha Henderson replied firmly. As the stagecoach pulled away, Magnolia looked back at the town that had rejected her and then embraced her. Cohen stood at the front of the crowd, his love and support visible even at distance. She would return to him and to the community they had helped transform, but she would also carry their story forward to places where other people needed to see that intelligence, courage, and moral conviction could overcome any barrier society chose to erect. The woman who had once been unwanted was now indispensable, not because she had changed, but because she had shown others how to see clearly what had always been there. If you enjoyed this story of how courage, education, and refusing to accept injustice can transform not just individual lives but entire communities, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more inspiring stories about ordinary people who changed the world through extraordinary determination. Share in the comments what part of Magnolia's journey resonated most with you. And remember that sometimes the people society overlooks are exactly the ones it needs most.